Clara Bennett stole the milk after the kitchen bells stopped ringing. Not the silver, not the wine, not the sugared pears cooling on the blue porcelain plates meant for noble mouths. Milk, half a small bottle, wrapped in a clean cloth and hidden beneath the left side of her gray servant cloak where the folds hung loose enough to lie. Beside it, pressed against her ribs, were 2 hard pieces of bread, a strip of cold smoked meat, and a paper packet of fever powder she had taken from the healer's cabinet when no one was watching the corridor. Her heart beat against all of it. Too loud, too guilty, too alive. Blackthorn Keep's kitchen was never truly quiet, even after midnight. The ovens breathed heat into the stone walls. Copper pots clicked softly as they cooled on their hooks. Ash settled in the hearth. Somewhere near the pantry, a mouse scratched behind a sack of flour, braver than most servants because at least no one accused a mouse of knowing its place. Clara moved between the work tables with a basket of folded linen in her arms. That was the trick. Always carry something honest when hiding something dangerous. A maid with empty hands invited questions. A maid with linen belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. She could pass the pantry, the scullery, the back corridor, even the narrow servant door near the east stair, and most people would see only work moving through the keep. But Mrs. Harlow saw everything when cruelty made her bored. Stop. The word cracked across the kitchen like a ladle striking iron. Clara froze. The head maid stood near the spice shelves, arms folded over her stiff black dress, her gray hair pinned so tightly it seemed to pull mercy from her face. 2 kitchen girls behind her stopped whispering. A footman carrying a tray paused near the door. Even old cook lifted her head from the cooling racks. Mrs. Harlow's eyes dropped to Clara's cloak. Open it. Clara's fingers tightened around the linen basket. I was only taking these to the washroom. Open it. No one moved. That was the worst part. Not the command. Not the eyes. The waiting. Servants knew how to become statues when another servant was about to be punished. Sympathy could be dangerous if it was seen too clearly. Clara slowly set the basket down. Her hands found the clasp of her cloak. For one breath, she thought of running. Then she thought of the child in the old chapel. His cracked lips. His shaking hands. The way he tried not to cough because coughing hurt too much. She opened the cloak. The bread fell first. One piece struck the floor and rolled beneath the table. The smoked meat followed, then the cloth-wrapped bottle of milk. The paper packet of fever powder slipped free last and landed near Mrs. Harlow's black shoe. The kitchen went silent. Then the whisper came. Thief. Small. Soft. Enough. Mrs. Harlow bent, picked up the packet, and read the healer's mark stamped on the paper. Her mouth tightened with satisfaction. Food is one thing. Medicine is another. Clara said nothing. Words would only make it worse, and the truth was too fragile to survive this room. A kitchen girl near the sink murmured, She's been taking things all week. I knew it. She barely eats at supper. Maybe she sells it outside the walls. Rogues. That word did not need to be spoken. It lived under every accusation in Blackthorn Keep. Food stolen from the royal kitchen did not stay food in people's minds. It became betrayal. Secret meetings. Enemy camps beyond the snowline. A lowborn maid with pale skin, tired eyes, and no family important enough to defend her could be turned into a traitor before dawn. Mrs. Harlow stepped closer. Who are you feeding? Clara kept her eyes lowered. The fever powder lay open in the woman's hand. Children's dose. Too small for a grown wolf. Too clear for anyone who knew how to look. The kitchen door opened behind them. No one heard it at first. Not until the air changed. Heat remained in the ovens. Smoke remained in the rafters. The pots still clicked softly on their hooks. But every person in the room seemed to feel winter enter without wind. Mrs. Harlow turned. So did Clara. Alpha King Sebastian Crowe stood in the doorway. He wore black, as he always did, though tonight his coat was unbuttoned at the throat and shadowed with snow melt at the shoulders. He must have come through the lower corridor without guards, or dismissed them before entering, because he stood alone beneath the archway, dark hair swept back, face still, eyes sharp enough to make every hidden thing in the kitchen feel suddenly exposed. No one spoke. No one breathed loudly. Sebastian's gaze moved from Mrs. Harlow's hand to the bread on the floor, then to the small bottle of milk near Clara's shoe. Last, to the fever powder. He looked at the mark. Then at Clara. Not angry. Not yet. That frightened her more. Mrs. Harlow dropped into a stiff curtsy. Your Majesty. I caught her stealing from your kitchen. The word should have ended everything. Clara waited for chains, for guards, for the cold command that would turn suspicion into punishment. But Sebastian Crowe did not look away from the medicine. For a child, he said. The kitchen went still in a different way. Clara's heart struck once hard. Mrs. Harlow blinked. Your Majesty? Sebastian stepped into the kitchen and picked up the fever packet himself. His gloved thumb brushed the printed dosage. His expression did not change, but something colder than anger entered his eyes. He looked at Clara again. Where were you taking this? Clara swallowed. In her mind, the child in the chapel coughed again. Small, wet, afraid. She said nothing, because if the wrong person heard the answer, Liam would not survive the night. Sebastian Crowe did not ask the question twice. That was how Clara knew he was not like Mrs. Harlow. Mrs. Harlow repeated commands because she enjoyed the sound of obedience breaking under them. Guards repeated commands because they wanted fear to do half their work before their hands had to. Powerful men repeated questions when they believed the answer already belonged to them. Sebastian only waited. The fever packet rested in his gloved hand. The bread lay on the kitchen floor between Clara's shoes and Mrs. Harlow's black hem. The milk bottle had rolled against the leg of a work table, its clean cloth coming loose around the glass like a bandage slipping from a wound. For a child, he had said. Not accusation. Observation. That made it harder to lie. Clara kept her eyes lowered. I was hungry, Your Majesty. The kitchen exhaled around her. A poor answer. A stupid answer. Everyone in the room knew it. The medicine knew it. The small dosage printed on the packet knew it. Sebastian knew it most of all. His gaze did not leave her face. You take children's fever powder when you are hungry. Mrs. Harlow's mouth tightened, pleased again. She lies as badly as she steals. Clara said nothing, because silence could still protect Liam. A lie could be torn apart. A name could be followed. A place could be searched. But silence, if she held it tightly enough, might keep one sick child hidden beneath the burned roof of a chapel for one more night. Sebastian looked toward the headmaid. Leave us. Mrs. Harlow blinked. Your Majesty? Everyone. No one argued. The kitchen emptied in frightened pieces. Kitchen girls vanished through the washroom door. The footman backed into the corridor. Old cook wiped her hands on her apron, though they were already clean, and disappeared behind the pantry curtain. Mrs. Harlow remained a second longer than wisdom allowed, then curtsied stiffly and left with anger in the straight line of her back. The door closed. Only Clara and the Alpha King remained. And the stolen food. Sebastian set the fever powder on the table. Are you feeding rogues? No, the answer came too fast. His eyes sharpened. Clara wished she had hesitated. Fear made truth sound guilty when it hurried. Are you meeting someone beyond the walls? She swallowed. No, Your Majesty. Then where were you going? The child coughed in her memory again. Small, wet, afraid. Clara bent to pick up the bread with hands that did not feel like hers. Back to work. Sebastian watched her gather the fallen things. He did not stop her. That frightened her too. Punishment had shape. This patience had none. You will return the food, he said. Clara's fingers closed around the milk bottle. Yes, Your Majesty. She placed the bread on the table. The smoked meat. The fever powder. Not the milk. She told herself it was an accident. Sebastian saw. Of course he saw. His gaze dropped once to the cloth-wrapped bottle still hidden against her palm. Then he looked away, as if he had decided not to notice what he had already understood. Go, he said. Clara nearly looked up. Nearly. Your Majesty? You are dismissed. No chains. No guards. No command to search her cot, her pockets, her history, her shame. Clara curtsied because her body remembered duty even when her mind did not trust mercy. Then she walked to the servant door with the milk bottle pressed beneath the linen basket, and her heart beating so hard she thought he must hear it. Sebastian did not follow immediately. That was why she believed, for 7 foolish minutes, that he had let her go. She left through the east corridor, past the washroom, slipped behind the coal room, and reached the narrow back gate where servants carried ash after dawn. Snow fell beyond the wall in thin, silent sheets. Clara pulled her cloak tight, tucked the milk against her ribs, and stepped into the night. Only when Blackthorn Keep disappeared behind black pines did Sebastian Crowe move from the shadow of the outer wall. He wore no crown, no escort, only a dark coat, silent boots, and suspicion sharp enough to track footprints through snow. He had not arrested his maid for stealing food. Not yet. First, he wanted to see who she was willing to risk everything to feed. The snow tried to erase her footprints. Clara knew it would. That was why she kept moving beneath the pines instead of taking the old chapel road. The road held tracks too honestly. Boots, wheels, paws, anything heavy enough to press into winter became a confession there until morning. But the forest was kinder to people who had no right to be outside the keep after midnight. Branches dropped snow without warning. Wind dragged loose powder over the ground. Shadows broke the shape of a person into pieces. Clara walked fast. Not because she was brave. Because stopping would let fear catch up. The milk bottle pressed cold against her ribs beneath the linen basket. The bread had been left behind on the kitchen table. The smoked meat, too. The fever powder, worst of all, sat under the Alpha King's hand somewhere inside Blackthorn Keep, because she had not been clever enough to steal it twice. Her throat tightened. Liam needed the powder. His skin had burned when she touched his forehead yesterday. His cough had gone deep, then wet, then quiet in a way that frightened her more than sound. Children should complain when they hurt. They should whimper, kick blankets away, ask impossible questions, demand more milk, hate medicine, cry for someone who could answer. Liam had only whispered, "Will they come back?" No child asked that unless someone had. Clara pulled her cloak tighter and kept walking. Behind her, the keep disappeared between black trees and falling snow, its towers rising like teeth against the moonless sky. Ahead, the forest sloped downward toward North Chapel, though no one called it that anymore. People in the keep called it the burned chapel, if they called it anything at all. A place ruined by fire 3 years ago. A place servants avoided because old stones remembered screams better than prayers. Clara had avoided it too. Until 6 nights ago, when she had gone beyond the ash gate to gather fallen wood and heard a child coughing beneath the floor. The chapel appeared between the trees slowly. First the broken steeple, then the blackened stone arch, then the hollow windows with no glass left in them, only snow collecting along the sills like white cloth over dead eyes. Clara looked behind her. Nothing. Only trees. Only snow. Only the sound of her own breath. Sebastian Crowe stood 30 yards back beneath a pine heavy with ice and watched her check the darkness like someone used to being hunted. That was the first thing he had not expected. A thief looked for witnesses. This girl looked for danger. He had followed her from the keep without difficulty at first. Her footprints were small and hurried. Her cloak too thin for the cold. Her path uncertain until it became terribly certain. She did not wander. She did not meet a rogue at the tree line. She did not leave the food in a hollow stump or signal to hidden enemies. She went to the burned chapel. Alone. Sebastian's suspicion changed shape. Not softened. Changed. Clara slipped through the broken side door, careful not to let the hinge scream. Inside, the chapel smelled of cold stone, old smoke, wet wood, and sickness. She crossed the nave where moonlight fell through the collapsed roof in pale strips. Snow had drifted over the front pews. The altar was cracked. A black scorch mark climbed the wall behind it like a hand that had tried to escape the flames. Then came the cough. Small. Weak. Human. Sebastian stopped outside the broken window. Clara knelt beside a pile of old cloaks near the side wall and set the linen basket down as gently as if it held glass. "I'm back," she whispered. The cloaks moved. A boy's face turned toward her from the shadows. He was thin enough that his cheekbones looked carved, his dark hair damp with fever, his lips pale and cracked. One wrist lay outside the blanket, marked by old silver burns and the faint, bruised circle of rope. His eyes opened halfway, unfocused at first, then desperate when they found her. "You came," he breathed. Clara's face broke in a way Sebastian had not seen in the kitchen. Not guilt. Relief. "Of course I came." She pulled the milk bottle from beneath her cloak and warmed it between both hands. "I brought you milk, Liam." The name struck Sebastian like a blade hidden under snow. "Liam." "No." The child coughed again, turning his face into the old cloak to muffle the sound, as if even pain had been taught to stay quiet. Clara lifted him carefully, supporting his shoulders with one arm while holding the bottle to his mouth with the other. "Slowly," she murmured. "Small sips." Sebastian stared through the broken chapel window at the boy's neck. At the chain there. At the blackened pendant resting against his fevered skin. A wolf carved in dark silver. The Crowe family mark. The pendant that had been buried 3 years ago in an empty coffin because everyone had believed the royal pup died in the North Chapel fire. Clara bent over the child, shielding him from the cold with her own cloak. And outside in the snow, Alpha King Sebastian Crowe stood silent, because the maid he had followed for stealing milk was feeding his dead nephew. Sebastian Crowe had buried an empty coffin. That was the first thought that reached him. Not anger, not command, not even disbelief. An empty coffin beneath frozen ground, wrapped in black velvet and royal grief, lowered while the entire court stood in silence, and pretended silence could make sense of a child's death. He remembered the small carved lid, the Crowe banner folded over it, his sister's name whispered in the chapel ruins because there had not been enough of her left to bring home, and her son's pendant placed inside the coffin because everyone said Liam had burned with her. Everyone. He had believed them. Now the pendant rested against a living boy's throat, blackened at the edge, dented near the wolf's ear. Real. Sebastian's hand closed around the broken window frame until old ash crumbled beneath his fingers. Inside, Clara Bennett did not know she was being watched by the king she had robbed. She only saw the child. She wrapped her own thin cloak around Liam's shoulders, tucking the torn edge beneath his chin with hands made careful by fear and practice. The boy leaned against her as if her small body were the only wall left between him and the world. His fingers clutched her sleeve while he drank from the bottle in slow, painful sips. Not too fast, Clara whispered. You remember what happened last time? Liam nodded weakly. A cough took him before he could swallow again. Clara set the milk aside at once and held him forward, one hand against his back, the other bracing his chest so the fit would not fold him in half. She did not flinch from the wet sound. She did not recoil from sickness. She listened to it, counted through it, waited until the worst passed. Sebastian had seen royal healers panic with less reason. This maid only pressed her cheek briefly to the boy's hair and breathed. Good. That's good. You're still fighting. Liam's eyes fluttered open. They'll be mad, he whispered. Let them. They said thieves get whipped. Clara went still, only for a breath. Then her hand returned to his hair. Then I will stand where the whip lands first. Sebastian felt the words strike somewhere beneath his ribs. Not because they were dramatic, because she meant them. The maid who had stood silent in his kitchen, accused of stealing, had not defended herself with the truth because the truth had a child's face and fevered skin. She had let them call her thief rather than say Liam's name aloud where the wrong ears might hear. Sebastian looked again at the boy's wrists. Old rope marks. Silver burns. Not from the fire. From captivity. The chapel had not killed Liam Crowe. Someone had taken him from it. Someone had let Sebastian bury an empty coffin. Someone inside his own territory had hidden royal blood beneath burned stone while the court mourned a lie. Liam turned his face toward the cracked wall, eyelids heavy. Is he coming back? Clara's hand tightened around the bottle. Who? The boy shook his head, panic making his breath hitch. The man with the wolf ring. Sebastian went colder than the snow outside. A wolf ring. Every beta of Blackthorn wore one. Clara heard something then. Perhaps his breath. Perhaps the old ash breaking beneath his hand. Her head snapped toward the window. For one suspended second, their eyes met through the broken chapel glass. Fear crossed her face first. Then recognition. Then something stronger than both. She moved faster than Sebastian expected. In one motion, Clara pulled Liam behind her, snatched the small bread knife from beside the milk bottle, and stood between the sick child and the Alpha King of Blackthorn Keep. Her hand shook. The blade did not lower. You followed me, she said. Sebastian stepped through the broken chapel doorway, snow clinging to his black coat, his eyes fixed on the boy behind her. Clara lifted the knife higher. Not to attack, to promise she would try. You will not take him back to the men who starved him, she said. And for the first time in years, Sebastian Crowe had to face the truth that his kingdom had protected a traitor better than it had protected a child. The knife was too small to stop a king. Clara knew that. It had a wooden handle worn smooth by years of cutting bread in the servant's kitchen. Its blade was short, thin, and slightly bent near the tip. It was not made for battle. It was not even made for fear. It was made for crusts, apples, string around flour sacks, and the small ordinary work of people no one remembered unless something went missing. Still, she held it between Liam and Alpha King Sebastian Crowe. Because small things were sometimes all the poor had. Sebastian did not look at the knife first. He looked at her hand, at the way it shook, at the white line of her knuckles, at the ridiculous courage of a maid standing barefoot in chapel dust, half frozen beneath a servant cloak, willing to put her body in front of royal power because she believed power was what had hurt the child behind her. Then he looked at Liam. The boy had pulled the old cloak up to his chin. His fever-bright eyes were wide with panic, fixed on Sebastian's black coat, as if darkness itself had walked into the chapel. One small hand clutched the burned pendant at his throat. The crow wolf. Sebastian could not stop seeing it. For 3 years, that pendant had belonged to a grave. Now it trembled against a living chest. Liam, Sebastian said. The name did not come out like a command. It came out like something dragged from a wound. The boy flinched and hid more fully behind Clara. Clara stepped sideways with him, keeping herself between them. Do not say his name like you own him. The old chapel seemed to hold its breath. No servant spoke to Sebastian Crowe that way. Not in Blackthorn Keep. Not in the royal hall. Not in the kitchens where even Mrs. Harlow lowered her voice when his boots crossed the corridor. But Clara did. Her face had gone pale beneath the dirt and cold. Her eyes were frightened, yes, but steady in a way fear could not ruin. She knew what he was. She knew what he could do. She knew no one would believe a maid over an Alpha King if this ended badly. And still, she did not move. Sebastian stopped 3 paces inside the door, far enough not to crowd the boy, close enough to smell sickness, smoke, old silver, and the faint sweetness of stolen milk. I will not hurt him, he said. Clara's laugh was small and broken. That is what men say before they carry him away. Something in Liam's breathing changed. Too fast. Too shallow. Clara heard it instantly. She lowered the knife just enough to reach back with her free hand, finding the boy's shoulder without turning away from Sebastian. Breathe slowly, she whispered. Look at me, not him. The child tried. Failed. Coughed. The sound folded him forward until Clara nearly dropped the knife to catch him. Sebastian moved on instinct. Clara lifted the blade again. Stay back. He stopped. Not because she could stop him. Because she had asked him to. Because Liam was staring at his coat, as if every black sleeve in the world belonged to the man with the wolf ring. Sebastian drew a slow breath. Then, deliberately, he removed his gloves. 1 finger at a time. He set them on a broken pew where Clara could see both hands were empty. Then he unfastened the black signet ring from his right hand and placed it beside the gloves. Clara's eyes flicked to it. The crow crest. Not the same ring Liam feared. A king's ring. Older, heavier, marked with the crowned wolf instead of the beta's side-facing beast. My name is Sebastian Crowe, he said quietly. His mother was my sister. Clara's grip faltered. Only for a second. Her eyes moved from his face to Liam's pendant, then back again. She did not trust him. Not yet. That was clear in every line of her body. Good, Sebastian thought. Someone should have distrusted men in his house sooner. Liam's voice came from behind her, small and cracked. Uncle. The word broke the chapel more completely than the fire ever had. Sebastian's face changed. Not much. Enough. The cold mask slipped at the edges, and beneath it Clara saw grief, so old it had become part of his bones. Yes, he said. Liam stared at him, confused by fever, fear, and memory. They said you didn't look for me. Sebastian went still. Clara looked at him then, truly looked, and saw the wound those words made. Not anger. Shame. The kind that did not defend itself because it already knew it had arrived too late. I buried an empty coffin, Sebastian said, and I let the men who gave it to me keep breathing. Clara lowered the knife halfway, not because she trusted him, because Liam was watching her decide. Sebastian did not step closer. Tell me who starved him. Clara's fingers tightened around the handle again. Outside, somewhere beyond the snow and ruined stones, a wolf howled once from the direction of Blackthorn Keep. Liam whimpered. Clara turned her body around him like a shield. Sebastian's eyes darkened. The chapel had hidden a child, but someone had followed the king too. The howl did not come from the forest. Sebastian knew that before the sound faded. Wolves in the wild called differently. Their voices rose from hunger, warning, grief, distance. This howl was controlled. Short, cut off before it could become music. A signal, not a cry. From Blackthorn Keep. Clara heard it too. Her face changed in the candleless gray of the ruined chapel, fear tightening around her mouth with such familiarity that Sebastian understood she had been listening for that sound long before tonight. Liam shrank behind her, one hand clutching the burned pendant at his throat until his small fingers trembled. "They know," the boy whispered. Clara lowered the bread knife only enough to kneel beside him. "No one knows anything yet." It was a lie, a gentle one, the kind told to sick children because truth had teeth and fever made the skin too thin. Sebastian looked toward the broken doorway, then back to Clara. "How long has he been here?" Clara hesitated, not because she did not know, because answering him meant handing over pieces of Liam's hiding place, and she had spent 6 nights learning that survival depended on giving powerful men as little as possible. Sebastian saw the calculation in her eyes. He deserved it. 6 nights, she said finally. Maybe 7. He was weak when I found him. Where? Clara's fingers moved to Liam's hair, smoothing it back from his damp forehead. Under the chapel. Sebastian's gaze sharpened. There is no chamber under North Chapel. There is a cellar. Her voice was quiet, but certain, hidden beneath the cracked altar stones. I found the edge of the door when I came for firewood. I heard him coughing below. Liam closed his eyes. Clara continued, each word pulled from a place she clearly did not want to reopen. There was a silver chain around his wrist. Not enough to kill him. Enough to keep him weak. Enough to hurt if he tried to shift. There was old water in a bowl, but no food. No blanket. No light except what came through a crack in the floor. Sebastian's hand curled at his side. The chapel seemed to darken around him. Liam had been beneath the ground, while the keep slept in warm rooms. His blood had been hidden under the ruins where Sebastian had mourned him. Someone had known. Someone had fed the lie for 3 years, then locked the living proof beneath stone when it became inconvenient. "Why did you not tell anyone?" he asked. The question came out colder than he meant. Clara looked up at him. For the first time, anger entered her fear. Who would have believed me? Sebastian said nothing. She stood slowly, the bread knife loose in her hand now, no longer raised, but not forgotten. "Mrs. Harlow calls me thief for taking milk. Guards grab me before I finish a sentence. Your healers do not come when servants cough blood unless a noble complains about the sound. If I had walked into Blackthorn Keep and said a dead royal child was chained beneath the burned chapel, I would have been locked away before sunset." The truth struck because it did not need shouting. Sebastian thought of the kitchen, the bread on the floor, the fever powder in his hand, the way no one had asked Clara why until he did, and even then she had not trusted him with the answer. He looked at Liam. "Did she know who you were?" The boy's fever-bright eyes flicked to Clara. Clara answered first. "No." Liam nodded weakly. "I told her my name." "Only Liam," Clara said. "Not Crowe. Not Royal. Just Liam." Sebastian looked at the pendant. Clara followed his gaze. "I thought it was something he stole back from whoever hurt him. I did not know it belonged to your family. And still you came every night." She swallowed. He was hungry. As if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. Sebastian had heard councilmen speak for hours about loyalty and never say anything as clean as those 3 words. Clara glanced toward the door. "The fever powder is still in your kitchen. I have medicine in my coat." Her eyes snapped to his. Sebastian reached slowly inside his coat and withdrew the packet he had taken from the table before following her. He held it out, not to Liam, but to Clara. A choice. Her hand shook when she took it. She mixed the powder with the last of the milk, speaking softly to Liam until he drank. Sebastian watched her measure the dose by instinct and care, not training. A poor healer's patience. A sister's hands. A thief's courage, if thieves stole only to keep children breathing. Outside, another signal cut through the snow. Closer. Clara's face went white. Sebastian stepped to the broken doorway, the cold night framing him in black. Who else knows this place? Clara held Liam against her chest. The man with the wolf ring. Sebastian did not turn around. He already knew the answer he dreaded most. "Beta Warren Pike," he said. Liam began to cry without making a sound. And in that silence, Sebastian understood the full shape of the theft. Clara had stolen milk from his kitchen. Warren had stolen a child from his bloodline. Only one of them had been called a criminal. The third signal came from the chapel steps. Not far. Not hidden. Close enough that the sound slid through the broken doorway before the snow could soften it. Liam made a small, wounded noise and buried his face against Clara's dress. Clara wrapped both arms around him at once. The fever packet crushed empty in one hand, the bread knife lying useless near her knee. Sebastian stood at the doorway, black coat still dusted with snow, His body turned toward the dark like he had become part of it. Then the torches appeared. Orange light moved between the trees. 1, 3, 6. Too many for a search party looking for a lost maid. Too few for royal rescue. Clara's stomach sank. She knew what punishment looked like when it came with witnesses. Beta Warren Pike stepped through the ruined chapel arch with 4 guards behind him and snow shining on the shoulders of his dark fur cloak. He was a broad man with iron-gray hair, a trimmed beard, and a face built for concern in public places. On his right hand, catching the torchlight, was a silver ring marked with a side-facing wolf. Liam saw it. His whole body locked. Clara felt the terror go through him like cold water. Sebastian did not move from the doorway. Warren stopped when he saw him, only for a breath. Then he bowed, low and perfect. "Your Majesty, thank the moon we found you." Sebastian said nothing. Warren's eyes slid past him, into the chapel, to Clara kneeling with Liam half hidden in her arms. The concern on his face sharpened into something useful. Warren whispered, as if he had discovered a miracle instead of walked directly toward one. "By all sacred blood." The guards shifted uneasily. Clara pulled Liam closer. Warren stepped inside, voice rising just enough for everyone to hear. "Seize the girl." Sebastian's head turned slightly. No guard moved yet. Warren looked at them, anger flashing beneath his grief mask. "That is a royal pup in her arms. A missing Crowe child. She has stolen food, medicine, and now we find her hiding him in the burned chapel like a hostage." "No," Clara said. The word came out rough. "Small." Warren ignored her. She must have kept him weak to control him. Fed him scraps. Filled his head with fear. Why else would he be here instead of in the king's care? Clara stood slowly, keeping Liam behind her. Her legs trembled. Her voice did not. He was chained under the altar. Warren's eyes hardened. A thief lies when cornered. Liam's fingers twisted into Clara's apron. No, the sound was barely more than breath. Warren looked at him with gentle cruelty. "You are confused, child. Fever does that." Sebastian finally spoke. "Does it?" The chapel went colder. Warren bowed his head toward him. "Your Majesty, she has endangered royal blood. The law is clear. Allow me to remove her before she poisons the boy further." "Poisons him," Sebastian repeated. "I brought milk," Clara said, before fear could stop her. "And fever medicine. He would have died without it." Warren's mouth tightened. "You admit stealing from the royal kitchen?" "Yes." The guards looked at her. So did Sebastian. Clara lifted her chin, pale and shaking, a maid in a ruined chapel holding a child everyone had buried. "I stole milk because no one was feeding him." For 1 second, no one spoke. Warren used that second. He lunged forward and grabbed Clara's wrist. Liam screamed. Not loudly, not strongly, but enough. Sebastian moved. Warren's hand left Clara as if the air itself had torn it away. The Alpha King caught him by the front of his cloak and slammed him back against the blackened stone wall hard enough to shake ash from the arch above them. The guards froze, torches hissing in the falling snow. "Careful," Warren choked. "The girl has turned you against your own Beta." Sebastian's eyes were dark and merciless. "My Beta just reached for the woman protecting my nephew." Warren's face changed. Not much. Enough for Clara to see the mistake. He had expected anger, confusion, shame. He had not expected Sebastian to claim Liam aloud before the guards. Clara held the boy tighter. Sebastian released Warren slowly, but not kindly. "Search the altar," he ordered. Warren went still. The guards looked to their king, then moved into the chapel. One lifted the cracked stone slab near the burned altar. Beneath it, darkness opened. A cellar door, an iron latch, and wrapped around the handle, a broken length of silver chain stained with old blood oil. Liam began to sob silently against Clara's side. Warren Pike stared at the chain. Sebastian looked at him. This time, the traitor had no ready grief left to wear. The silver chain told the truth better than Warren Pike did. It lay across the chapel floor in 2 broken lengths, dull beneath the torchlight, darkened where old blood oil had dried into the links. Not enough to kill a royal pup. Enough to weaken him. Enough to keep his wolf buried under fever, hunger, and fear until the world forgot he had ever existed. Clara stared at it and felt sick. She had touched that chain 6 nights ago with her apron wrapped around both hands, pulling until the links scraped open her palms because Liam had been too weak to lift his arm. She had not known then what silver did to royal blood. She had only known a child was chained beneath stone and crying without sound. Sebastian looked at the chain, then at Warren's ring. The silver band on the beta's hand caught the firelight, its side-facing wolf cut deep into the metal. A proud mark. A loyal mark. The kind of symbol men wore when they wanted every room to remember they stood close to power. Liam saw it and whimpered. Clara felt him shaking against her side. "The ring," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the chapel heard it. Warren turned toward her slowly. "Be careful, girl." She had been careful for 6 nights. Careful with milk. Careful with footsteps. Careful with lies. Careful with a fevered child's breathing while men in warm rooms slept behind walls that had failed him. She was done being careful for Warren Pike. Clara pointed to the broken chain. "There was a mark on the lock when I found him. A wolf's head, but the jaw was cut wrong. Like your ring." Warren laughed once. "A maid recognizes signet marks now. She recognizes the thing a terrified child has been describing all week," Sebastian said. Warren's laughter died. The Alpha King stepped closer, and the torches seemed to burn lower around him. "Remove it." Warren's hand closed into a fist. "Your Majesty, this is beneath us." She is twisting a sick boy's fear into, "Remove the ring." No one moved. Then one of the guards did. He caught Warren's wrist before the beta could step back. Another guard seized his shoulder. Warren struggled once. Not enough to look guilty to fools. Enough to prove he did not want the ring taken. The silver band came free. Sebastian held it near the broken lock. The mark aligned perfectly. Side-facing wolf. Wrong-cut jaw. Same depth. Same curve. The chapel went silent. Liam's small voice broke it. He put it on the lock, the boy whispered. Every torch seemed to freeze. Warren's face hardened. "The child is fevered." Liam clutched Clara's apron, but he lifted his head. His eyes were wet, terrified, but clearer than they had been before the medicine. He said Uncle Sebastian stopped looking. He said nobody wanted me back. Sebastian did not move. That was the worst part. His stillness became something colder than grief and sharper than rage. Clara looked at him and saw the wound those words made, not because they were true, but because someone had fed them to a starving child in the dark. Warren saw it too and changed tactics. "Your Majesty," he said quickly. If the boy was hidden, it was for his protection. The succession was unstable. "Enemies, you buried him alive under my mourning." Warren's mouth shut. Sebastian turned to the guards. "Search him." They found the vial in Warren's inner coat. Small, black glass, sealed with wax. When Sebastian opened it, the bitter metallic smell spread through the chapel. Blood oil. The same scent on the chain. The same scent Clara had scrubbed from Liam's wrist with snowmelt and stolen soap until her hands went numb. One guard went pale. "Your Majesty," Sebastian closed the vial in his fist. Clara pulled Liam closer as Warren was forced to his knees beside the broken chain. The beta looked at her then with hatred so bare it no longer pretended to be rank. "You should have left him where you found him," he said. Clara's fear vanished. Not forever, just long enough. She looked down at the man who had starved a child and called himself loyal. "No," she said. "That is what your whole court did." No one answered. Not Warren. Not the guards. Not even Sebastian. Because in the ruined chapel, with silver chain at their feet and Liam breathing against her side, the maid they had called a thief had just named the truth everyone else had failed to carry. Blackthorn Keep learned the truth before sunrise. Not from rumor. Not from servants whispering behind pantry doors. From the Alpha King himself. Sebastian Crowe returned through the front gates with snow on his black coat, blood oil sealed in a glass vial, a broken silver chain wrapped in cloth, and Liam Crowe asleep in Clara Bennett's arms. That was what the guards saw first. Not the beta and chains behind them. Not the royal escort moving with drawn steel. The child. A child the kingdom had buried 3 years ago. A child whose small hand clutched the front of Clara's ruined cloak as if even sleep did not trust the world enough to let her go. By the time they reached the royal hall, half the keep had gathered beneath the black banners. Servants stood near the rear pillars. Nobles arrived half-dressed and pale with confusion. Mrs. Harlow appeared near the kitchen corridor, her stiff black dress buttoned wrong at the throat, her eyes widening when she saw the girl she had called a thief carrying royal blood against her chest. Clara felt every stare. Her arms ached from holding Liam. Her palms still burned from old scrapes reopened by cold and fear. Her dress smelled of smoke, milk, fever, and chapel dust. She wanted to disappear into the servants' passage and sit somewhere dark until her body remembered it was allowed to stop shaking. But Liam whimpered when a noble stepped too close. So Clara stayed. Sebastian saw the movement. Back, he said. The single word moved the entire hall. Noble stepped away. Guards widened the circle. Even Mrs. Harlow lowered her eyes. Warren Pike was dragged forward in silver chains, his wolf ring removed, his face bruised with anger rather than shame. The broken chain from the chapel was placed on the floor before him. The vial of blood oil followed. Then the ring, its side-facing wolf mark matching the impression on the cellar lock. The hall understood slowly. Then all at once, Sebastian stood beside Clara, not in front of her, not hiding her behind royal power, but close enough that anyone looking at her had to see him too. This child, he said, voice low and clear, is Liam Crowe. My sister's son. My blood. The royal pup this court buried in an empty coffin. A sound broke through the hall. Shock. Grief. Guilt wearing many faces. Liam stirred against Clara's shoulder, but did not wake. Sebastian looked at Warren. My beta kept him chained beneath North Chapel. Weak. Hungry. Hidden beneath the ashes of our mourning. Warren lifted his chin. I protected the line from instability. You starved it. The words cut clean. No one defended Warren. Not now. Sebastian's gaze moved to the servants at the rear of the hall, to the kitchen staff, to Mrs. Harlow, then finally to the bread and milk set on a tray beside the evidence. She was accused of stealing from my kitchen, he said. Clara's throat tightened. Mrs. Harlow went pale. Sebastian turned toward Clara, and for the first time, the entire hall followed his gaze without laughing, without dismissing, without seeing only a gray dress and tired hands. She did not steal from my house, he said. She kept my blood alive when my own court failed him. The words struck harder than applause could have. Clara looked down at Liam, because looking at the hall was too much. But Liam woke. Only halfway. His fever had eased, though weakness still held him close. He blinked at the banners, at the guards, at the nobles, then turned his face into Clara's shoulder. Don't make me go, he whispered. The hall heard. Every person heard. Clara closed her eyes. Before she could answer, Sebastian lowered himself to one knee before the child. The Alpha King of Blackthorn Keep knelt on the stone floor in front of a maid, holding a boy everyone had left for dead. No one will take you from her, he said. Liam's small fingers tightened in Clara's cloak. Sebastian looked up at her then, not as a king judging a servant, as a man looking at the woman who had carried what his kingdom abandoned. Clara Bennett is under my protection, he said. Anyone who calls her thief again will answer to me. Silence filled the hall. Then, one by one, heads bowed. Servants first, then guards, then nobles who had arrived expecting scandal and found shame waiting in royal light. Clara stood beneath the black banners with Liam in her arms and did not know how to accept a room that had finally become quiet enough to hear the truth. She had stolen milk. Yes, bread, medicine, a little warmth from a house that had more than enough. But Warren Pike had stolen a child, a bloodline, and 3 years of mourning from a king who had trusted him. Only one theft had saved a life. And by dawn, all of Blackthorn Keep knew the difference. The room prepared for Liam had never held a child. That was the first thing Clara noticed. It was too clean, too careful, too royal. A fire burned behind a black iron grate, warming carpets thick enough to swallow footsteps. Heavy curtains shut out the last blue shadow of dawn. A carved bed stood beneath the Crow banner, its blankets turned down by servants whose hands shook whenever Liam whimpered in Clara's arms. Silver bowls of water, folded linen, fever cloths, and 3 glass bottles of medicine waited on a side table beside a royal healer who had arrived still fastening his coat. Everything in the room was meant to heal him, and yet Liam would not let go of Clara's cloak. His small fingers held the worn fabric at her shoulder with the strength of someone who had learned that comfort could disappear if he slept too deeply. His fever had eased, but fear remained awake in him. It watched every face, every sleeve, every ringed hand. The healer stepped forward. Liam buried his face against Clara at once. No, he whispered. The healer stopped. So did everyone else. That was new too. In the kitchen, a servant's fear was an inconvenience. In this room, a child's fear changed the movement of adults. Sebastian stood near the door, still in the same black coat he had worn through the snow, his expression controlled, his eyes fixed on Liam with a grief so carefully held that Clara almost looked away from it out of mercy. Almost. He needs to be examined, the healer said softly. I know, Clara answered. The healer looked to Sebastian, not to her. Sebastian did not speak. His gaze moved to Clara. Permission. Again, the world tilted beneath her. Clara sat on the edge of the royal bed with Liam still in her arms. Listen to me, she whispered against his hair. No one touches you unless you can see their hands first. Liam's breathing hitched. She took the healer's wrist gently and turned his palms upward where the boy could see them. No ring, no chain, no black oil, just medicine. The healer swallowed and nodded, suddenly less certain of his own importance. Liam opened one eye. Clara kept her voice low. I will stay right here. Promise. Yes. His fingers loosened by half an inch. That was enough. The healer worked slowly after that. He checked Liam's throat, his wrists, the silver burns hidden beneath the blanket, the bruises around his ankles where old rope had healed badly. Each mark pulled the room tighter. Each quiet note the healer made seemed to carve another piece from Sebastian's silence. When the healer reached for the boy's left wrist, Liam flinched so hard the bowl beside the bed rattled. Clara caught his hand before panic could take him fully. Look at me. Liam looked. Not at the king. Not at the healer. At her. The room saw it. Mrs. Harlow stood near the far wall, summoned because every servant involved in the accusation had been ordered to account for what happened in the kitchen. Her face had gone pale in the firelight. She watched Liam cling to Clara as if the image had made her old cruelty suddenly too visible to hide behind duty. Sebastian noticed. Mrs. Harlow. The head maid stiffened. Your Majesty. You saw the medicine was for a child. Her mouth opened. Closed. I saw the dosage, Your Majesty. And you called her thief before asking whose fever she was treating. Mrs. Harlow lowered her eyes. Yes, Your Majesty. Clara felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. Cruel people seemed smaller when truth finally reached them, but the harm they had done did not shrink with them. Sebastian's voice remained quiet. You will not command her again. Mrs. Harlow looked up, startled. No one in this keep will. Clara's hand stilled on Liam's hair. Sebastian stepped closer to the bed, stopping where Liam could see him and still not feel crowded. When he is strong enough, he said, he will choose where you stand in his life. Until then, you stay because he trusts you. Clara looked at him. The Alpha King's eyes held hers, cold no longer in the same way. And because I do, he added. The words entered the room gently. That made them harder to bear. Liam's fingers relaxed at last, not enough to release her completely, but enough for the healer to wrap clean linen around his wrist. Outside the door, Blackthorn Keep woke under the weight of a truth it could not unlearn. Inside, Clara Bennett sat on the edge of a royal bed in a stained gray dress, holding the child everyone had buried, while the Alpha King made space beside his bloodline for the maid who had kept it alive. The stolen milk became evidence by noon. Not against Clara, against the keep. Sebastian had ordered every item from the kitchen laid out on the long black table in the small council room beside Liam's chamber. Half a bottle of milk, 2 pieces of hard bread, a strip of smoked meat, 1 packet of fever powder, a torn cloth from Clara's apron, stained where Liam had coughed against it in the chapel. Objects so small they looked almost foolish beneath royal banners. Yet every one of them had done what Blackthorn Keep had not. They had kept Liam Crowe alive. Clara stood near the wall with her hands folded in front of her, because standing still was easier than knowing where she was allowed to sit. Someone had brought her a clean shawl. Someone else had offered tea. A young servant had whispered, Miss Bennett, then blushed as if the title frightened her as much as it startled Clara. Miss Bennett. The word still did not fit. Sebastian stood at the head of the table, listening as the healer gave his report. Malnutrition. Fever from exposure. Silver damage at both wrists, old and repeated. The boy's wolf is suppressed, but not gone. The healer's voice lowered. Another week in that cellar, Your Majesty, and he would not have survived. The room went cold. Clara looked down, not because she was ashamed, because relief was suddenly too heavy to hold upright. Another week. 7 days. Less, perhaps, if the fever had turned. Less if she had been caught sooner. Less if Sebastian had taken the milk from her hand and sent her to the cells like any other king might have done. Sebastian's gaze moved to her. How did you know what to give him? Clara swallowed. My mother used to tend sick children in the lower village. The healer looked surprised. Of course he did. People were always surprised when poor women knew how to keep someone breathing without permission. She was not licensed, Clara added, before anyone else could say it like an accusation. But mothers came anyway when they had no coin for royal medicine. Sebastian's expression did not change, but his eyes sharpened with attention. Clara looked at the fever powder on the table. Liam's cough was wet. His skin was too hot, but his hands stayed cold. Milk was all he could swallow at first. Bread softened in water after that. Meat only when he could sit up. The medicine was for the fever, not the hunger. The healer said nothing. Then, slowly he nodded. Respect from experts was a strange thing. It arrived late and expected gratitude for the journey. Sebastian turned to the captain. And Warren knew the cellar existed? The captain placed a rusted key on the table. Found in his private strongbox. It opens the chapel latch. Clara stared at it. The key was small, ugly, ordinary. A child had nearly died because of something small enough to hide in a fist. Sebastian picked it up and closed his hand around it. For one moment, the controlled king vanished, and Clara saw the uncle beneath him, the man who had buried an empty coffin and learned too late that grief had been used to blind him. Then Liam cried out from the next room. Clara moved before anyone ordered her to. No one stopped her. She crossed the council room, pushed open the chamber door, and found Liam half awake in the royal bed, eyes wide, breath shaking. "The ring," he whispered. "I heard it." Clara reached him first. "It is gone. He comes when metal clicks." "I know." She sat beside him and took his hand carefully, avoiding the bandaged wrist. But not this time. Sebastian entered behind her. Liam saw him and tensed, then looked at Clara as if asking whether the world had changed enough to trust. Clara did not answer with words. She stayed. Sebastian saw it. Saw the child's eyes steady because she was there. Saw the stolen Maid become the only place his nephew's fear could rest. He set Warren's key on the table beside the bed. Then he looked at Liam. "No locked door in my kingdom will hold you again." Liam's fingers tightened around Clara's. "And her," he whispered. Sebastian looked at Clara. "Not past her. Not through her. At her. No one will take her either," he said. Clara's breath caught. Outside the chamber, the keep waited for orders, punishment, explanations, and the shape of tomorrow. Inside, a sick child held the hand of the maid who had stolen for him. And the Alpha King finally understood that some thefts were only mercy wearing the wrong name. By evening, Blackthorn Keep had run out of places to hide shame. It stood in every corridor. In the servants' kitchen where the bread had fallen from Clara's cloak, and everyone had called her thief before asking who was hungry. In the royal hall where Warren Pike's empty chair sat beside the Alpha King's dais like a wound carved into polished wood. In the nursery chamber that had been prepared too late for a child who should have been sleeping there for 3 years. And in the small hand still wrapped around Clara Bennett's fingers. Liam would not let go. No one tried to make him. That was the first difference. The second came when Sebastian Crowe ordered the entire household into the royal hall. Not only nobles, not only councilmen, not only guards with polished armor, and wolves who knew how to stand beneath banners without looking afraid. Everyone. Kitchen girls, stable boys, laundresses, footmen, healers. Mrs. Harlow with her face pale and stiff. Old cook wiping her hands on her apron though there was nothing left to clean from them. Servants who had whispered thief that morning stood shoulder to shoulder with nobles who had mourned an empty coffin and never asked who locked the chapel cellar from the outside. Clara stood near the lower steps with Liam pressed against her side. She should not have been there. That old thought came automatically. A maid did not stand before the court. A maid did not hold royal blood in public. A maid did not become the center of a room unless she had broken something, stolen something, or failed someone powerful enough to make the punishment interesting. But Liam leaned into her. So she stayed. Warren Pike was brought in wearing silver chains. He looked smaller without his ring. Not harmless. Never harmless. Only exposed. The broken chain from North Chapel was placed at his feet. The vial of blood oil beside it. The cellar key. The ring whose mark matched the lock. Each object landed on the stone table with a quiet sound, and each sound seemed to remove another layer of the man the keep had trusted. Sebastian stood above him. No crown, no ceremony, only black clothes, cold eyes, and a voice steady enough to make fear unnecessary. You told this kingdom Liam Crowe died in the chapel fire, he said. Warren lifted his chin. I did what was required to preserve order. A sound moved through the hall. Not outrage. Not yet. The room still wanted to understand how a familiar monster had worn a loyal face for so long. Sebastian looked toward Liam. And the child? Warren's mouth tightened. A weak heir divides a kingdom. Clara felt Liam tremble. She knelt at once, turning her body between him and Warren's voice. Look at me, she whispered. Not him. Liam obeyed. The hall saw that too. The Alpha King saw it most of all. Sebastian's face did not change, but when he spoke again, his voice had gone colder. You starved a child and called it order. Warren said nothing, because there was no language polished enough to make that sentence less true. Sebastian turned to the court. Clara Bennett was caught taking milk, bread, and fever medicine from my kitchen. For that, she was called thief. The word struck Clara, even though she knew it was coming. Sebastian looked at the servants first, then the nobles, then Mrs. Harlow, who lowered her eyes as if the floor could forgive her. She took what this house had in abundance, he said, and carried it through snow to a child this house had abandoned. Liam's hand tightened in Clara's. Sebastian stepped down from the dais. The hall shifted with him. He stopped before Clara and Liam, lowering himself enough that the boy did not have to look up at a king to hear an uncle. No one will ever chain you again, he told Liam. The boy's mouth trembled. And Clara? Sebastian looked at her then, not over her head, not past her apron, at her. Clara Bennett is under my protection, he said, loud enough for every stone in Blackthorn Keep to remember. She will not return to the servants' quarters. She will not answer to Mrs. Harlow. She will remain beside Liam for as long as he chooses her there. And anyone who calls her thief again will answer to me. Silence followed. Then Liam moved. He let go of Clara's fingers only to wrap both arms around her waist. The entire hall watched the lost royal pup choose the maid before the nobles, before the healers, before the court that had failed to find him. Clara's vision blurred. She held him carefully, afraid that too much emotion might break what fever and chains had not. Sebastian rose. Warren Pike will face judgment for treason against royal blood, he said. But let the first record of this night be clear. My beta stole my nephew. My court believed a lie. My keep punished mercy because it wore a servant's dress. His gaze returned to Clara. The maid you called a thief kept my blood alive. One by one, heads bowed. This time, Clara understood what it meant. Not pity, not guilt alone. Recognition. Outside, snow began to fall again over Blackthorn Keep, soft and silent against the windows. Inside, beneath the black banners, Clara Bennett stood with Liam in her arms and the Alpha King beside her, no longer invisible, no longer accused, no longer small enough for cruelty to step over. She had stolen milk, bread, medicine, a little warmth from a house that had forgotten how much it had. And because she had, a child lived. Because she had, a king learned the difference between theft and mercy. Because she had, Blackthorn Keep finally bowed to the woman who had carried its lost blood home.